all mine.
Oh. Jeez. Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry.
Whoa, infinite loop.
I'm gonna cast. So is that okay?
Yeah, do your thing. All right, are you ready to get started? Shall we?
You ready? Are you ready? Yeah. Do you want to put your stuff over here and then you
Yeah, I'm gonna move.
wait, is it? Oh.
Well, I'm counting it for my master.
But let me make sure it shows up on the live stream.
I haven't actually confirmed that I can. I'm just assuming I can and trusting that they're not going to.
Sick. All right. Thank you all so much for coming. Packed house. My name is Chris. I'm with IEEE. I'm with the IEEE student branch, and I'm an organizer at Hack Night.
Wait, what kind of position is work? It's okay.
Hi, I'm Victoria. I'm a junior majoring in CS and journalism, and I'll be presenting tonight.
She's part of Spark. I'm Lily. I'm the co-president of Spark. I'm a senior. I'll also be presenting today.
I'm Meg. I am one of the co-presidents of Women in Computing. Quick plug, I've had some people at Hack Nights be interested in joining the Women in Computing listserv. If you're interested, email wic, W-I-C, at u.northwestern.edu and just say you want to be on the listserv and we'll add you.
Okay. So let's get started. So this is our introduction to web development.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And today we're going to go over basic HTML and CSS. So our workshop goals today are to set up a text editor and project folder, learn some basic HTML and CSS, and then create some simple web page elements. Then we're going to host your first personal website on GitHub pages. So the first step we're going to take is to create a folder and save your project as your GitHub username .github.io, and then you're going to name the file within the folder index.html. Yeah.
So make your folders. Yes.
Okay. And then the file named index.html.
Oh no.
Should we show them Atom?
Yeah. Did everyone download Atom before this? Did anyone not download Atom before this? Yeah, it's okay if you have a different text editor. Does anyone not have a text editor they can use? Okay, cool. So I'm gonna be using Atom. Okay. So if you open Atom, you should have something that looks like this. And I'm just gonna add the folder that I just created as a project folder. So I'm gonna go here, click open, and I'm gonna make a new file called index.html.
Okay, cool.
Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Backtrack. So when you open Atom, what do you do?
So when you open Atom, you're gonna go to File, Add Project Folder, and you're gonna add that folder with your name or your username.github.io that you just created. And then you're gonna create a file, index.html, in that folder.
Any other questions?
Do I have to use this? If you don't want to, but I think you could. Okay. Okay, we're moving on, but if you have any questions, just raise your hand.
Okay, so now we're going to go over the basics of an HTML document. So the first step you want to do is just declare it as an HTML. So that's the first line where it says doc type HTML. And in HTML, you have these things called tags, which are in these caret things. So the first one is HTML. And if you look at the last line, it closes that tag. And every closing tag has a backslash accompanied with it. And then so for the second tag I want to point to is the head tag, which is where you list your metadata, which is basically data about data. And in this example, we have the title. And if you ever notice in your browser that each web page has a certain title, that's usually where the title goes to. So it's just naming your website. And then within the body is what you see within your browser. And you can organize your text based on importance. So there's H1, which is like your first header, and then P stands for paragraph, and that's usually what your body paragraphs are. And there are several other headers like H2, H3, and I believe it goes up to H6, and they get smaller because they're less important. Wait, what? I thought we were going to do that when we did the tutorial. Okay. And then a few more basic HTML tags are the A tag, which is like a hyperlink. So if you want to link to another site, you do a href and whatever the site name is. And if you put the attribute target blank, that opens it up in a new tab. Or if you want to download a file, you could just use the download attribute. And then there are also image tags, and you use the source attribute to link your image to your website. So the source can be from your computer, so locally, or from another website. And then these are a few more basic HTML tags. So there are lists. So there are unordered lists and ordered lists. Unordered lists are just bullet points, and ordered lists have numbers. And then these are a few more basic tags. So there's a footer tag, bold, I for italics, commenting out code, embedding, and captions. As you can see, the syntax for HTML is pretty intuitive. And then another important tag is called a div. So div just stands for division. And as you can see in the image, it just puts, it separates it into blocks so you can categorize different parts of your web page. And divs can be labeled as IDs or classes. An ID means that it's a very specific div, and when you style it in CSS, what the attributes you give it are specific to that div, but classes apply for several types of divs. So if you want a certain box to be the same and keep repeating that element throughout your site, you would use a class. And then for linking within your HTML file, you could just use the A tag and link it to different IDs. So you could give a certain div an ID attribute like home, and then when you click on it, it'll just go to that section of the page. Any questions about basic HTML? Sure. Okay. So, yeah. So now we're going to go back to Atom, and we're going to start the HTML. Oh,
What's your question?
I don't know if you said this before, but can you make a comment?
where is your? Oh, or we could do that.
Okay. To comment that, right?
Yeah.
Can you see this? Can I? How do I zoom in?
Not really.
Oh, it's working?
Yeah.
Can you see now?
This is gonna be really big. Should we zoom out a little or?
Okay, does that answer your question? Okay.
Good luck. Okay, so now we're gonna start our basic HTML document for your first personal website. We're gonna start by calling it doc type HTML. And we wanna put the HTML tags. After that, we wanna include our head. So within our head tag, we want the title. So, what should we name it? You can name it whatever you want. So if it's your personal website, just put in your name. Personal website. And then after that, you could put in the body tags. Okay. Okay. And I'm just going to put in a few divs to get started. So navbar is going to stand for navigation bar, and you're going to see what that does when we get to the CSS part. And within your navbar, you want to put in a few A tags. So, goes to hashtag home. Your sections can be like home, resume, and projects. Do we have any questions up to this point, or? And then below the navbar, so we want to start making the divs that we named in the links. So div ID, home. Should we go over classes afterwards?
Yeah, so don't worry too much about classes right now and what she's naming them. We'll go over all of that later, but for example, when she did a href equals pound key home, that's basically linking the word home on your website to where she did a div ID equals home. Did you go over images?
Yeah, I did it in the presentation.
Okay.
Should I go over them again? Or?
I think you're okay.
And for the image I just put here, you could put like your profile picture and just link it to wherever you have that locally.
You can also put like, well, can you put the image? Just do like source equals.
Right.
So under your image tag, you'll have an src equals, and then in quotes, you can put like a link to an image that you got from Google, for example, or if you know file pathing, you can link it to a file that you have on your computer.
Should I just take an image from Google?
Sure, yeah.
So to show an example, I'll just take an image from Google. Sorry. Which an image?
Just go to images and put a smiley face. Does everyone see how we did that? Does anyone have questions right now? Okay.
I don't want to keep track of where your divs open and close, which could be kind of hard. But if you look at Atom, it kind of underlines them for you. So the one div I have highlighted now, it links the very first home one. And under the home div, you want to start your resume div. Yeah. So we could pause and just check what this looks like in the browser. Where's like open browser?
I think they can just. Okay, so to check what it looks like, you can just double click on your index.html file here. It's not gonna work. There's something wrong with this. Oh. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, right now, what we're yes. So basically, right now, what we're doing is we're trying to lay down the HTML, and what HTML does is it basically just writes text on a blank page. And then CSS is the part that styles it, so that means like centering text or changing the font, adding colors, and adding effects and stuff like that. So I can go over each of these tags, I guess. Would that help? Okay, so the HTML tag is the tag you always need to have on your file. So doc type HTML is just identifying your file as an HTML file. And every tag you open, you have to close, or else you'll get errors. So in your head, like she said, metadata goes in there. So these things that you put on the head won't show up on the actual page. So the title tags are changing what the name of your tab is going to say. So if you want to see at any point what your HTML file looks like, just go to your file and like open it, and it should open up in a browser. Did you get it to work or not? Okay, so that's what we have right now. Okay, so is everyone able to open their file and have something show up?
Raise your hand if you have questions when you come around.
Sorry? Did you have a question?
They said, how do you open the file?
Oh, you can double click on it within your like binder or the folder it's in.
Yes. Okay, do you want to go back to the code?
Yeah.
Okay, so going down, we're at the, can you go to the top of the body? So after the head, right now the only thing we're putting in the head is the title of our page. After the head, we open up a body, and that's just where everything else on the page usually goes, unless you have a footer. So in the body, can you go to the very top of the body? So the first thing we have is a div, and divs are basically just separating a page into different sections. So div stands for division. So right now, I don't want you guys to worry too much about names of classes and stuff, because I'll explain all of that when I go over what CSS is. But just know the text in red. So on this screen, all the red text is the name of the tag. So like div, A, H1, H2, P. So these are all HTML tags. So A means that you're basically creating a link to something. And whenever you have an A tag, you probably want to have an href following it, and href will link it to some website or some part of your website. So in this case, it says #home. And that's it's too hard. And so that's going to link it to the ID on this page, home. So in line 12, we have ID equals home. So can you actually go to the HTML? Is it going to work? Oh, OK. So if you notice up here, now it says #home. So you didn't see anything change on the page because we just have one page. There's no scroll. But if it did scroll, then what would be happening is we would be going from the top of the page to wherever home is. Does that make sense? OK, can you go back? OK, so the rest of this stuff is all just like IDs right now. Divs. So H1 and H2 are just headers. It changes the size of the text. Question?
Oh yeah. Well, if I want to have a local image into the thing, how do I get the address?
I'll show. OK, so if you want to add an image locally, Instead of doing src equals this link, well, do you want to type it?
You could make a subdirectory within your folder. So you could name it image, and then image slash whatever your file name is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want?
Do you have?
I can just download something.
From that link.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna download this, and I'm gonna put it in here. I'm gonna make a folder called image, and then I'm gonna name this smile. So now we can say, look for image slash smile. And wherever so the reason we go from image is because it already assumes that your base directory is where you're in. So we're already in the hacknorthwestern.github.io folder. So all we have to do now is get into image and then pick smile.
It should show up, right?
I hope so.
Could you explain the slash after image?
Yeah, so the slash after image is just the file name. So I named the file smile, but whatever you name your file is what it should be.
Go back to, you can open it up and Command I, and you can see what the extension
Or just open the folder too.
So, okay.
I just know that you visited it so far, and I know where you.
Does anyone have questions now? Okay, let's move down. Okay. Okay, so I've gone through all the different types of tags that we've used so far. Do people have questions on anything else before we move on? Yes?
Why don't we have tags around line 22, but why does it still work?
120. Oh, it technically does have a tag, so it's kind of like that. Oh. Wait. It's like this is me is between the two div tags. So it's between the tags that are at like line 21 and line 23. I don't know if I
So
could-
we can have text between divs that doesn't have a key or an H1 or anything like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Should I move on to CSS?
Yeah. Should I finish this?
Oh, yes, finish.
Okay. I'm just gonna finish up the resume and projects divs. Is everyone up to this point?
Yeah.
Just for copying
Yeah.
down. Okay. Okay. And now we're going to move on to CSS.
Okay, so to be clear, this is what we have right now. Also, if you opened up the index HTML once already, you just have to refresh to update it. Wait.
Yeah.
If there's like nothing popping up like on the browser, like you go to your web page, do you know like why not?
There's probably an error.
Can
I
someone help her?
I can come check it.
Okay. So I'm just adding H1 tags and also text because I want it to say resume and projects on my page right now, or previously I had divs for resume and projects, but I hadn't written any text inside those divs. So now I'll refresh my page. You can see I have resume and I have projects. Okay, we're gonna move on to CSS so we can make our page look pretty. Okay, everyone good right now? Okay, cool. So CSS centers around something called the box model. So basically we have this box, and in the middle of the box there's the content. So if we look at this website, all of these things, these are contents that have boxes around them, but the boxes are invisible. So around a piece of content, you have something called a border, which is what you expect it would be. So you can make a border solid or outline or like dashed or something like that, and it'll basically just draw a box around your content. And then if you notice in this image, there's something on the inside of the border called the padding and something on the outside of the border called the margin. And so with CSS, what you can do is you can decide like some value for your padding, some value for your margin, and it'll actually add white space in between objects for you. And we'll show you guys examples of these in a sec. So now in CSS, there's something called selectors, which is basically those tags that we had before. So a selector could be a class, it could be an ID, or it could just be one of the normal tags. So like a div, an A, an image, or like a header. So H1, H2, stuff like that. And then for each selector, you have some list of properties. So there are default properties. So if we have no CSS, this is what our website looks like. But we want to change these properties so our website looks a little bit better. And the syntax for doing that is what I have on the right side of the screen here. So we have the name of a selector, and then inside curly braces, we have the name of a property and then a value for that property. And if you want to have multiple property values under a selector, you need to separate them by semicolons. Does anyone have questions? We'll show examples after. Okay. Okay, so let's go back to our website. This is what we have. So first we're going to turn this nav bar into a real nav bar. Oh, actually first, so we have an index.html file. We're going to add a new file, and it's going to be called main style. Style.css. So this is where we're going to put all of our CSS. And so how do we tell our website that we want to look into this file that we just made for our CSS? We need to link the CSS file to our website like Victoria talked about here. So in the head now, we're basically going to link this sheet that we just made and tell our HTML file to look for style.css.
Can you memorize it?
I looked for a long time. Text.
You got it.
Okay. Did everyone add that line? Yeah, what's up? You can link other things. You can link like JavaScript files, which we're not going to get into today, but you can also link like modules or frameworks and stuff like that. This is just telling us that it's a style sheet. Yeah. Yeah, go to shoutkey.com/ that's a bad one. After. This link will only work for the next 5 minutes, so. Also, please don't edit anything. Actually. Specific people can access. Hold on. Anyone with a link can view. Okay. It should work now if it wasn't working already. Are you on it? Okay, cool. Okay. Are we good? Shoutkey.com/after. That link? Okay, cool. Okay, so now we have our style.css, it's blank. Does everybody have that? Does everybody have line 5 added in their head? Okay, cool. So now the first thing we're going to do is we want our nav bar to look like a real nav bar, not just some text next to each other. So the selector I'm going to do is navbar. But so if we look here, we have navbar as a class. And the way you select a class is you put a dot, a period before it. So this is telling my file to look at everything that has the class navbar. And we have it in curly braces. So the first thing I want to do is let's change the background color of this navbar. And let's change it to some kind of gray. So and if I want to see those changes, you guys can change it to whatever colors you want, by the way. So I want to see these changes, so I save my file, I refresh. Cool. Did that work for everybody? If you want to. Okay. So I chose to use like a hex color here, but you guys could have just done something like this. So there are certain colors that are built into CSS, but also I have like a plugin on my Atom that will highlight the number to show me the color I'm doing, but don't worry about that. So you guys can pick whatever colors you guys want. Do people have this working? Does anybody need more time? Okay, cool. So we're going to move on. I'm going to skip that one for now. So now what I want to do is I want to change these text things so that I can actually see them. And I want to make them look a little bit better. So if we look at our HTML code, these are all in A tags, right? So what I'm going to do is I want to work with the A's now. But I want to be more specific. I want to only work on the A tags that are within the navbar class. So see here, we have a bunch of A tags, and these are all inside the div that has a class navbar. So to specify that, all I have to do is this. And this tells us select all of the A's that are within navbar. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to add a few properties here, and then I'll explain to you guys what they do in a sec. Okay, so we're gonna see what this looks like, and then hopefully it worked, maybe not. What happened? Oh. Okay, so now I have a pretty cool navbar. So I'll explain all of the things I added here. Also, a lot of CSS is like just pretty random. So you can always like Google and look for like, for example, what colors can I type to change my background color to if you want to use built-in colors. Or like, how do I center text? Google will tell you text align. So float here, float left basically tells me to put all of my items as far left as they can. Display block is just blocking these items separately, so each item has its block. Color is changing the color of the font. So there's a difference between color and background color. Obviously, background color changes the color of your background. Text align is aligning everything center. But the reason that this is still on the side is because it's aligning it in the center of the block. And then padding is what I was showing earlier with the CSS box style. or box model. So the padding that I did was this. So I have 14 px for pixels and 16 px. So what that's doing is 14 px is giving me 14 pixels of padding on top of the content and 14 pixels of padding on the bottom of the content. And then it's giving me 16 pixels of padding on the left and 16 pixels on the right. So you guys can play with that number if you guys want to create more space or less space in between your like blocks here. Does that make sense? So each of these home, resume, and projects are a block because we set display to be block. Any questions on those yet? Okay, so text decoration, none. Let me just show you what happens without it. And so without text decoration, you'll notice there are some lines under these words. Basically, I think that looks bad, so I added this. And then the last thing, font size, is just making the font a little bit bigger. Okay, are people ready? Does anybody need more time? Okay. This is a great idea. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Just a general question about how much time you should spend on the CSS, like these minute details of CSS for your website, or are there other ways to make it bootstrap it?
Yeah, so normally when you are building a website from scratch, you probably want to use some like sort of CSS tools. So Bootstrap is a good one that basically has a bunch of elements already made for you, and you can reference them and like add them to your site. Right now we're just coding from scratch because we're also trying to teach you guys CSS if you don't know it already. Okay, are people ready to move on? Cool. Okay, so we're not done with the nav bar yet. Some nav bars, when you hover over it, there might be some effect. So we're gonna do something similar. So this tells me on the links in the nav bar, when they're hovering, this is what I want them to look like. So I can make them look different now. And I'm just gonna change the font color and the background. So I changed the background to be some shade of white, and then I want the text now to be black because I can't see white text on a white background. So this is what it looks like now. So as you can see, now it's a little bit easier to see what these blocks are. As I highlight over them, they're changing colors. Is everybody ready to move on, or does anyone have questions? Okay. And then another property that you can have outside of hover is active. So that's basically if I've clicked on something, I want it to look a little bit different than if I hadn't clicked on it. So I'm going to do that. I don't know if I have an example for that. If I click on it, will it work? If it doesn't scroll, it's yeah. Why did I pick that number? So it's not going to do anything. So active, as you can see, when I click on home, it turns green because that's the color that I picked here. But as soon as I click off, it's not active anymore, so it's not green anymore. I believe there's also a property focus. So focus will change it if I click on it. Maybe not. Okay, well, that's all stuff you can look up. Okay, what's next? Okay, cool. So the nav bar looks pretty good now. We're gonna move on to changing the body so that everything else can look pretty good. So to select the entire website, basically, all we have to do is select body. And I'm just gonna change the background color to some shade of blue. Also, I'm going to change the font. And to change font, it's actually, the property is called font family. So you could change the font to something really general, like it suggests cursive here. I think that works. Oh, so yeah, now my background is a blue. All the font is cursive, but we're not going to do that. That's crazy. So my font family, I'm just gonna pick sans serif, but you could also pick a specific font like Times New Roman or Arial, whatever you want. There are a set of fonts that CSS can recognize. There are also other fonts that you might have to download like font packages and then reference those in your file. But for now, we're just gonna stick to the ones that CSS knows. Okay, so, and then I kind of want to center my text, but you guys don't have to. But just to do that, I'm going to do text align. Center. And let's see what happens. Now everything's in the center. Does anyone need more time? So the nav bar is only telling the items in the nav bar div to go to the left. So the body isn't overriding because as we can see, these are still in the left, right? Does that make sense? Do you need help with something?
I can come around.
Does anyone else need more time? Okay, we're gonna move on. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do some hover effect so that when I hover over the smiley face, I can see some text. So as you can see in our HTML, you're probably wondering about this, maybe, maybe not. What does this container div do? So basically we did this so that now we can style our text more easily. And I'm gonna write some styling for the container. So in CSS, you can either have relative position or absolute position. For the most part, you want relative position because that means that if I change the size of my window, like make it smaller or bigger, it'll still be the same on the screen relative to, like, for example, if I have a picture in the middle of the screen and it's relatively positioned, if I make my window size smaller, it'll still be in the relative middle of the screen. But if I have absolute position, so say like 50 pixels from the left, that might be the center of the screen if I have the current screen I'm on. But if I like drag the screen to make it smaller, it's not going to be on the center of the screen anymore. It's still going to be 50 pixels from the left. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to type some things, and you guys might not know what they are, but I'm going to show you what they do, and then I'll explain each of the things. Okay, so I recommend you just copy what I type for now, and then I promise I'll go over it in a few minutes. The order does not matter. Sometimes you might have two selectors that kind of conflict. For example, one selector might change the color to green and another selector might change the color to blue. But if you're having problems with that, you can do something like this, I think. And it basically tells it, pay attention to this one. Yeah. There's a lot of code here. No. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna start writing a selector for our div that says middle. Yes. So the middle div is right here. So basically, we have a container div. Inside the container, we have two things. We have a image, and then we have another div called middle. And inside that div, we have that caption. So right now it looks like this. We have the image, and then we have this caption below. What the CSS I'm doing right now is doing is it's gonna put the this is me in the center of this picture, but it's gonna be invisible unless we hover over the picture. So I'll show you guys what each of those parts looks like once I finish writing the code. Okay, so don't worry about what I did means for a little bit. Yeah, we're gonna keep writing some stuff. So now I wanna give some styling to the text that I have, which is this. Okay, so if you notice, I'll go back to the code. But if you notice, on the website now, whatever text that you had as your caption should not be showing anymore. It should be invisible. Just really quickly, I used to have this is me under here, now it's invisible. Do people need more time? Okay. So I'll slowly start explaining some of the stuff that I did, I guess. So the opacity is how opaque or transparent it is. So an opacity of 1 means it's completely opaque. So like you can see it completely as it should be. An opacity of 0 means it's completely transparent, which is why I made middle transparent. And here, inside middle is where the text is. So that's why I can't see the text anymore. A lot of this is just positioning and padding. So with CSS, it can be pretty frustrating. A lot of the time you might feel like you're just like guessing with numbers and you have to play around with it. But if you use Bootstrap, that usually helps a little bit. And then I'll explain what transition and transform do once we can see everything on the website. How many people don't have this code down yet? Okay, I'm gonna move on for time, but if you need help, let us know. Just raise your hand. Okay, so we have all this CSS set up, and most of it we don't really know what it's doing. So what we're gonna do is add hover effects to container. So you can always just type :hover after some selector, and that will change what happens when you hover over it, no matter what kind of selector it is. First, so I have two things under container. I have profile, and I also have middle, and then I also have profile caption if we want to consider that. But I want different things to happen to each of these divs when I hover. So to select which one I'm affecting, I'm going to do another class here, and I'm going to say class profile. So this is selecting specifically the image right now inside the container. And under profile, I'm going to say when it hovers, I want to change the opacity of the image to 0.3. So that should be pretty transparent. If we hover, we can see, looks like it's highlighted over. The other thing I want to do is when I hover over this container, I want to make that text that I had transparent, and I want to make it so that I can see it. And all that text is under middle. So I'm just going to change the opacity of middle to 1. And now, when I hover over it, I can see this is me. It's a block, and the background color is green because I set it to be. But you guys can do whatever you guys want. And if you notice, it's fading a little bit slowly. When I click on it, it's not immediate. But when I fade off of it, it is. So the reason it's doing that, that's what this transform and transition stuff is doing. So transition tells it take half a second to get to the full opacity of 0.3. But if I said like 2 seconds, see how that was a lot slower? So I only changed the fade for the text in the middle. So if you notice, the background is still fading or like changing opacity pretty quickly, but in the middle, it's a lot slower. Does anyone have any questions? Do people have this working? Cool.
There's one girl who's like has a weird dog. The one in the back. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so also we can go over linking something outside quickly. So let's try to link our resume, maybe. One sec. Okay. So if we want to add, for example, link into a resume or a link to like any other website, so we already did it a little bit up here, but we did it to something local. So I'll just show you guys what an external link might look like. So I'm going to add the A tags to my resume, even though they're within the H1 tags. And in here is where we're going to put the link to the resume. So So now you can see it's a link. Yikes. And it takes me to Google. And when we talked about how to link this image locally, the same thing goes for linking like another HTML page, for example. So if you wanted Resume to link to another HTML page that you made, you can use the same method here by just finding it in your directory. Okay, so that's pretty much all the material that we had to cover for you guys. But if people have like requests for features that they want to see how they might be done, can work with you. Oh yeah, never mind, we're not done yet. So the next thing we're gonna do is, so we have this website, but if you notice, the link to this website is just like a file location. But if we want other people to be able to see this, we need to push this to GitHub and then host it. So we're gonna go through that. So you should have basically an index.html file and a style.css file in a folder called yourusername.github.io. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to github.com and make that a repository. So mine was hacknorthwestern.github.io. And so I'm going to make a new repository inside Hack Northwestern and name it and you can add a description or whatever. But for now, I'm just going to use the default settings. And now we have a repository on GitHub and we have these files locally. So now what we need to do is we need to push these files into GitHub. So you can follow the instructions here. Basically, we want to open up, okay, if you're on a Mac, you want to open up Terminal. If you're on a Windows, open up the command line tool, command prompt. This is pretty small. So, how many of you guys can know how to use the terminal, the command line? Okay, cool. I'll go through really quick just what you need to know to do this part. So when you open it, you start in your base. So if I press LS, I can see everything in it. Wow. So I put my hacknorthwestern.github.io folder in some path. So I'm just gonna go to that right now. And to do that, just type CD for change directory. And then I'm choosing to go into documents, into GitHub, into that. Does everybody, well, I press enter and now I'm inside that folder. Is that working for people? Does anybody need more time? Okay, so now I'm in here, and now I'm gonna follow the instructions that we had here. So I'm gonna do, so you guys should have this like in your page. I'm just gonna copy paste literally what it says here. Oh, fuck. I need to get in it. No, I just made the repository on GitHub. Okay, so follow the instructions on the top. So get in it. It should say initialized empty git repository. You can skip the git add readme. No one needs a readme except for projects that you do. Git commit. So if you were at our GitHub tutorial, hopefully you know what all of this is doing. But git commit is just me saving the work that I've done, and then -m lets me leave a message, and usually you have messages on your commits so you can go back and see which commit was which. Okay, so it says I have untracked files, which means GitHub doesn't know which files I'm trying to commit. So I'm gonna say git add. I wanna add all of the files that I have. So git add period will select everything. Sorry if I'm moving fast, I can answer any questions. So now if I do git status, I can see that there are 3 files I'm adding. Does anybody have any questions about what I just went through? Do people need more time? Okay, cool. So now I can git commit. And then, so git commit saves it, but to push it to GitHub, I just say git push, and then it'll tell me, oh, okay. Now we have to connect this remote repository to the repository on GitHub. So we can just copy paste what they gave us. So origin just refers to the actual repository. You have an origin, and then you have the repository that's on your computer that's local. Okay, so now if I refresh here, I have some files here. Do you think it's gonna work? Can you check on me? Okay, cool. So now if I go to hacknorthwestern.github.io, we can see our website. And now anybody can see it. So if you didn't want everyone to see it, there are some settings you can play with here, I think. Unclear. Is there a way to not have it work? You can just delete the repository if you didn't want anyone to see your website. Okay. Do people have this working? Do people need more time? Does anybody have any questions? Okay, cool. So now that we've hosted our site, we're done with the tutorial, but there are some resources if you guys want to take down that can help you a lot with web development in general. So I'll start from the bottom actually. So nc.me Namecheap is a website that will give you guys free .me domains. So right now, the domain we're using is like your username.github.io. But if you want it to be something that looks like, I don't know, like lily.me, for example, that's probably taken. But if I wanted it to be a .me domain, then Namecheap will give those to you for free, actually. But if you want a .com or something else or a more specific domain, then you can go to like Google Domains or GoDaddy or whatever. Don't do GoDaddy, but it does work. CodePen is kind of like a cool place you can go to see other people's and also your own like HTML, CSS, JavaScript creations. So actually, we have a CodePen for everything that we just did here. And you can see we just typed in the HTML and the CSS and it like loaded a preview of it for us. But CodePen is cooler than this. You can see what other people are making. So there are all these cool things that are like animations, stuff like that. And you can click on it and see like the code that they used. So it's pretty cool. If you find something you want to learn, you can just click on it and I can see everything that they put on their CodePen. I can. If you want the link right now, you can go to shotkey.com/think. Yes. So moving on, Nice Portfolio is just a website with a bunch of different personal websites, and a lot of them are like pretty unique. So if you want inspiration for making your own website, you can look at them. And then CodeDrops is pretty cool. It has a bunch of like cool CSS and like JavaScript stuff. So something I like looking at is like, this is just a yearly review. And it has a bunch of cool stuff that people have like written tutorials on, or like, so these are all a bunch of demos. So for example, this isometric and 3D grids, I can click on it and I can see all of it. I can see this all happening. And then if I want to see the code for it, I click on this drop, and then this person has written a little bit about it, how they did it, and then I can say download source, and that will give me all the source code to do what they just did. So there are a lot of small things on CodeDrops that you can do, like things as small as like button effects or like drop down menus and stuff like that, you can do here. And that, yeah, so like this one is a smaller demo, or like I can click on these and they all do different things. And if you want to add that to your website, for example, you can just download the demo and pick the one you want. Cool. Okay, that's pretty much all we have. We can upload the slides, and I'll put a link to the CodePen in a README, I guess, or something. Yeah. Sure. If you guys have questions, we can stick around for a little bit, and you guys can come ask. Or if you're wondering about like if you can do a certain thing or not, you probably can do it. Cool. Thanks for coming. What's next week course advising? I think so. Is next week course advising? What do I check?
Dude, you're on the... Oh, do you have a question? Yeah, I just have like a question. Do you want me to... I can
and next week we'll be doing course advising because registration is coming up. So if you guys have questions about like what classes to take or questions about specific classes or need some advice, that's what we'll be doing. Yeah.